Standing by the window where morning sunlight streamed in, Jennifer Clark took a sip of coffee in her small apartment. In the Boston suburbs, her eyes reflected the hardships of life, yet a softness remained in her features, and when she smiled, a youthful glow returned. "Mom, I can't tie my tie." Tyler's voice called from the living room. The 8-year-old boy had a red tie draped around his neck, his fingers awkward, entangled in it. Jennifer smiled gently and knelt in front of her. "Son, yes, this is tricky, but don't worry. Mom will help you." As she nimbly fixed her son's tie, she felt her chest tighten at the thought of today, her sister-in-law Caroline's wedding, one of the places she least wanted to be. Jennifer had worked as a waitress at the local Maple Diner for over 10 years long, hours from morning till night, meager tips, and the fickle attitudes of regular customers, yet she never complained, working tirelessly to raise her son. 3 years ago, Jennifer's world collapsed when she discovered her husband Michael was having an affair with his young secretary. Michael was thriving as an elite employee in the sales department of a major corporation, climbing the career ladder rapidly. For him, a wife who had become just a waitress no longer matched his social status. "I want a divorce," he had told her. Jennifer didn't shed a tear that day. She simply nodded quietly, signed the necessary papers, and returned to her parents' home with 5-year-old Tyler. That was her pride. "Tyler, today is a special day. It's your aunt's wedding, so we need to be extra polite." Her son was smart and sensitive. He had felt how Michael's family, especially his former mother-in-law Beverly and sister-in-law Caroline, had treated his mother, Grandma Beverly, and Aunt Caroline don't like you, do they, Mom? Jennifer looked straight into her son's eyes, trying not to lie. "Adult relationships are complicated. Tyler, they're people from a different world than us, but blood ties remain unchanged." Even as she said this, Jennifer remembered Caroline's cruel words every time she gossiped about her being just a waitress. A small wound formed in her heart. Caroline always prided herself on being superior to her, a graduate of a prestigious university, now engaged to James, a university professor, and today she would hold a lavish wedding at a luxury hotel. Her mother-in-law Beverly was even harsher. Her class conscience was strong, and she had never accepted that her son Michael had married a woman of low status after the divorce. Her contempt for Jennifer became even more blatant. Strangely, she was also cold toward her grandson Tyler, treating him almost like evidence of her son's mistake. As she adjusted Tyler's suit, Jennifer remembered the wedding invitation printed on thick premium paper with gold lettering. It had clearly been sent for appearance's sake. She had initially planned to decline, but when Tyler said, "I want to see Dad," she decided to go for her son's sake. She didn't know how fateful this day would be for her and Tyler, and for her former in-laws. "All right, Tyler, let's go." Jennifer took a deep breath and smoothed her simple navy dress. She had avoided flashy clothes, trying not to stand out, but unknowingly, this enhanced her natural beauty. Before leaving the apartment, she placed her hands on her son's shoulders and said gently, "No matter what happens, we are family." Never forget that. Tyler looked up at his mother and nodded firmly, getting out of the taxi in front of the luxurious Grand Harbor View Hotel in Boston. Jennifer and Tyler hesitated for a moment, climbing the marble staircase and passing through the lobby. With its massive chandeliers, they saw the wedding reception desk ahead. Mrs. Clark, the reception staff, checked the list and momentarily looked confused. Her eyes moved back and forth between the list and their faces several times. "Please wait a moment," she called another staff member and consulted. Quietly, Jennifer began to feel anxious. She squeezed Tyler's hand tight and looked around. Luxurious decorations, perfectly arranged flowers, and people chatting with expensive champagne in hand. She keenly felt that she didn't belong in this world. "I'll show you to your seats," the returned staff member smiled, though she seemed uncomfortable. They were led to a spacious hall with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of Boston Bay. As they approached their seats, Tyler suddenly stopped. "Mom, what's this?" While other relatives' table plates were labeled Clark family or Harris family Jennifer's seat alone was marked single mother. Waitress Tyler's seat simply said single mother's child. The blood drained from Jennifer's face. She felt an impulse to flee immediately, but hesitated when she saw her son's face. Tyler looked confused, his expression mixing anger and embarrassment. "It's okay, Tyler. Just a bad joke," she pretended to be calm, flipped the card over, and took her seat. The venue gradually filled with people, women in glamorous dresses, men in sophisticated suits, and then Beverly appeared at the entrance. She wore a luxurious silver gray dress with real pearls gleaming at her neck and ears. "Oh, Jennifer, you came!" Beverly's voice mixed surprise with slight disappointment. She almost ignored Tyler and left to greet another guest. The solemn sound of the pipe organ began to play, and everyone stood up. From the far end of the aisle, James appeared in a white tuxedo. Behind him followed Michael. Jennifer's chest tightened, seeing her ex-husband for the first time in 3 years. He had transformed into an even more successful man. Then the music changed, and Caroline entered, escorted by her father. She was wrapped in a magnificent wedding dress, wearing a smile full of happiness. The venue sighed at her beauty. The ceremony proceeded, solemnly vows, exchange of rings, and the kiss. The bride and groom looked perfect. Jennifer maintained her smile for Tyler's sake, despite her complex feelings. The reception began with champagne and Lord Darras being served. Tyler received orange juice and was curiously observing his surroundings. Soon it was time for the lavish dinner. "Mom, Dad is looking at us," Tyler whispered. Indeed, Michael was glancing in their direction, but showed no sign of approaching. Instead, AOW clinking of glasses resonated throughout the venue. Beverly stood up and took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming today to celebrate the wedding of my son's sister, my beloved daughter, Caroline." She spoke eloquently about the newlyweds and their wonderful future. Then, suddenly, her gaze turned to Jennifer. "We have a special guest today, former family member Jennifer." All eyes in the venue turned to Jennifer. She felt her face flush. She normally works as a waitress at a restaurant, "so I have a suggestion." Beverly's voice dripped with malicious pleasure. "Jennifer, since you're a waitress, why don't you help serve dinner today?" The venue fell silent. Jennifer sat, frozen. Humiliation and anger coursed through her body, but Tyler's presence kept her from reacting. Beverly, even as a joke, that someone began to say, but Beverly waved her hand to silence them. "It's not a joke. She's a professional." Beverly's eyes gleamed coldly. "The dinner server tonight, not just a second-hand item." Her laughter echoed throughout the room gradually. Relatives and friends began to laugh too. Many people, including Caroline, joined in the mockery. Even Michael, though uncomfortable, was smiling. Jennifer felt tears welling in her eyes. Her hands trembled, and her throat was dry. She wanted to escape, to disappear from this place. Just as she was about to stand up, there was movement. From the seat next to her, Tyler had quietly pulled back his chair and stood up at the sight of the 8-year-old boy. The laughter in the venue gradually subsided. Tyler's expression showed a calmness and determination beyond his ears. He began walking toward the stage, where the microphone stood. Jennifer tried to call her son back in a low voice, but he had already stepped forward in complete silence. Tyler stood before the microphone with his small body. He surveyed the adults. "I have a present for the bride." The boy's voice was surprisingly composed. "Actually, she is," as those words echoed through the venue. The smile vanished from Caroline's face. She turned pale as if she had seen a ghost and froze. The groom, James, looked at his fiancée with confusion. Michael hurriedly stood up, trying to call out, "Tyler, that's enough." But the entire venue was waiting for Tyler's next words. Tyler took a deep breath, the atmosphere pressing down on the 8-year-old boy's shoulders was too heavy, but his eyes didn't waver. He adjusted the microphone stand with one hand, put the other in his pocket, and looked around at the adults. "Please stop making fun of my mom." Tyler's voice, though small, clearly resonated throughout the venue. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on him, holding their breath. The blood drained from Beverly's face, and Caroline remained frozen. The groom, James looked around in confusion. "Tyler, come here," Michael called, his son in a low voice. But the boy ignored him. "None of you know my mom?" "Tyler," continued she, "wakes up at 5 every morning to make my lunch. She always checks my homework before I go to school. And she stays fans all day at work, then reads me books at night." Jennifer remained frozen in her seat, feeling tears stream down her cheeks. She hadn't known her son had been watching her so closely. "My mom never stops smiling. No matter how tired she is, so nobody has the right to hurt her." Murmurs began to rise from the venue. Beverly hurriedly tried to approach. "Tyler, sweet boy, this is a special day. I'll buy you ice cream later, so let's leave the adult talk for now, shall we?" Tyler quietly shook his head at those words. "I overheard Aunt Caroline and my dad talking." With that single sentence, the venue froze again. Caroline suddenly stood up and grabbed her groom's arm. "James, it's a child's imagination. Get him out of here." However, James hesitated, seeing Tyler's calmness and Caroline's panic. He gently removed the bride's hand and quietly sat back. "Down 3 days ago when I went to deliver the RSVP to Aunt Caroline's house. Dad's car was parked there," Tyler continued. "Matter-of-factly, I was on my way to piano lessons, but I realized Mom had forgotten to mail an important letter, so I stopped by Aunt Caroline's apartment." Michael and Caroline's face visibly paled. The door was slightly open, and I could hear them talking inside. "At first I thought I'd say hello, but when I heard my name, I stopped and listened." Beverly tried to interrupt. "Again, what are you saying? Today is a day of celebration in a place like this. Child's made-up story. I have evidence." At Tyler's words, Beverly fell silent. The boy took a smartphone out of his pocket. Jennifer wondered when her son had gotten a smartphone. Then she remembered it was a birthday present from Michael. "I recorded it." Gasps of surprise rose from the venue. Michael tried to rush forward, but venue staff stopped him. Caroline's face lost its last trace of color, and she stood rigid like a statue. Tyler tapped the screen of his smartphone and held it close to the microphone. First came the sound of rustling, then a clear female voice. "Mike, I want to see Jenny's stupid face at the wedding. I'll write single Mother Waitress and humiliate her in front of everyone. The plan is perfect. Beverly is on board too. It's going to be the best wedding." Then a male voice. "Michael's, be careful. What if people find out you're pregnant with my child? Our relationship will be exposed too." Commotion erupted in the venue. Jennifer couldn't believe her ears. Michael and her sister-in-law and pregnancy. She covered her mouth with trembling hands. "The recording," continued Caroline's laughter. "James doesn't know anything yet. If I tell him after we're married, it'll be too late. I've calculated the timing so he won't know it's our child." Even more shocking revelations followed. "Since you divorced that woman, you've returned to your true self. We've always been special." Michael's voice. "But be careful. Don't tell anyone yet." Tyler stopped the smartphone and quietly returned it to his pocket. The venue was wrapped in complete silence. Groom James stood stock still, his face ashen. His family was also stunned. Caroline had begun crying, and Michael's face was flushed with anger and shame. Beverly collapsed into a chair, speechless with shock. "My mom works hard every day to raise me." Tyler began speaking again. His voice trembled slightly, but his determination remained unwavering. "Aunt Caroline, please stop bullying me with my dad. And you should tell the truth to the man who was supposed to be my new dad." The boy looked at the groom. "I'm sorry, but I thought you had the right to know the truth." The atmosphere in the venue was as cold and heavy as ice. James slowly stood up and stared at Caroline, his eyes mixed anger and sadness. "Is this true?" His voice trembled. Caroline covered her face with both hands and began crying violently. "No, Tyler is lying. It's a child's made-up story." She desperately denied it, but her breakdowns told the whole story. Beverly recovered and stepped forward to contain the situation. "Everyone, this is clearly a misunderstanding. It's an excited child's imagination. Please don't ruin this wonderful day with such nonsense." However, James's father stood up and said sternly, "Has our family been deceived, son? Let's go, this marriage should be reconsidered. The groom's family began to stand up, and Mass James gave the bride one final look and said, "Was it true?" Caroline tell me she couldn't answer. Instead, Michael stood up. "Enough," he said in a heavy voice. "Leighton, tell the truth." As the venue watched with bated breath, Michael bowed his head. "It's true that I've been having a relationship with Caroline, and she is pregnant with my child." With those words, the venue fell into complete chaos. All color drained from James's face, and he staggered backward. His mother rushed to support her son. James's father was furious and tried to confront Michael, but people around him held him back. Tyler put down the microphone and stepped off the stage. He walked to his mother and placed his small hand over Jennifer's. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I couldn't stand seeing them hurt you." Jennifer couldn't find words. She embraced her son, pouring all of herself into that small body. The surrounding chaos felt like distant noise to her. Her world now consisted only of this brave boy. Caroline continued crying violently, beginning to blame Michael. Beverly was fiercely scolding both her son and daughter. Cries of family disgrace. "How could you do this?" echoed through the venue amidst the chaos. Jennifer took Tyler's hand and quietly said, "Let's go home." They quietly rose from their seats and headed toward the exit with dignity intact. On their way, a voice called from behind, "Wait, please." Turning around, they saw the groom, James, walking toward them with shaking steps. His face was pale, and his eyes were bloodshot. The man who should have been the star of the wedding now looked like a broken doll. "Is it really true?" he asked Tyler, his voice low so others couldn't hear. Tyler looked straight into James's eyes and nodded slightly. "I'm not lying. The recording is real." James closed his eyes. Painfully, his expression was etched with pain and the sadness of betrayal. Jennifer felt sympathy for him. They were in similar situations. "Your son is brave," James said, weakly. "To think that a small child would have the courage to speak the truth among adults." He placed his hand on Tyler's shoulder and quietly said, "Thank you." From inside the venue, the commotion continued. Caroline's crying, Beverly's angry shouts, and the voices of confused guests all mingled together. Caroline came out from the venue. Her wedding dress was disheveled, and her once perfect makeup was ruined by tears. She desperately grabbed James's arm and pleaded with him, "That's a lie. It's a child's delusion. Believe me." James slowly shook off her hand. Michael admitted it didn't. He's the father of the baby, right?" His voice was ice cold. "That's not true. He's just confused." Caroline was desperate. "It's our wedding. We've been in love for 5 years. Don't destroy that over this." James shook his head and said quietly, "I've loved you for 5 years, but you betrayed my trust with your brother, no less." He cut off his words and struggled to breathe. "I need time to..." Then Michael appeared too. He seemed to have escaped from the chaos. Inside, his attire was also disheveled, and his face showed in intense turmoil. "Caroline, stop lying," he said in a tired voice. "It's all my responsibility." James the frat, "Apologize. We both of you are responsible." Beverly cut in. Her anger was now directed at both her son and daughter. "You've ruined the family's honor. How could you do something so shameful?" Beverly glared at Jennifer and Tyler. "You two are just as guilty, exposing family shame in such a public place." Jennifer remembered 3 years of humiliation and pain, all the contempt and insults she had endured, and today, the final humiliation. She had tried to endure silently for her son's sake, but it was over now. She straightened her back and said in a calm voice, "You should be the ones to know shame. Your son had an inappropriate relationship with his sister, resulting in a child, and to hide that you tried to marry an innocent person, we only revealed the truth." Beverly had no response to those words. Caroline was now collapsed in tears, kneeling on the floor. "James, please don't leave me." The groom's father approached and grabbed his son's shoulder. "Let's go, son. We shouldn't associate with this family." He looked at Jennifer and Tyler and slightly bowed his head. "Thank you for telling us the truth." As James's family left, the groom still stood in front of Caroline, dragging his feet. "Is the baby really Michael's?" he asked. Finally, Caroline couldn't answer and just kept crying. Her silence told the whole story. James slowly removed his ring and placed it before her. Goodbye, Caroline. His words sounded like a final farewell, and he too left following his family. Michael sat down next to Caroline and put his arm around her shoulders. He looked up at Jennifer once, then closed his mouth as if at a loss for words. His eyes showed the color of remorse. Beverly held her head in confusion, muttering, "What do I do? What happens now?" Her arrogance had disappeared in an instant, and she now looked like a weak elderly woman. Jennifer took Tyler's hand and said quietly, "Let's go home. There's no reason for us to be here anymore." As they were leaving the venue, James appeared before them again. He hesitated as if to say something, then bowed deeply. "Your son is brave. Thank you. Thank you for telling me the truth. I was blind." His voice mixed gratitude and sadness. Jennifer smiled. "Gently, time will heal. May we both have new beginnings." Outside, the evening air enveloped them. They got into a taxi, waiting in front of the hotel, and Jennifer gave their address. "I'm sorry, but it's a bit far. Is that okay?" she asked the driver. The driver looked at the mother and son in the back seat and smiled warmly. "No problem, ma'am. Have a nice evening, both of you." As the car started moving, Jennifer hugged her son tightly. "Tyler, you're my hero." Tyler buried his face in his mother's chest and said in a small voice, "Did I do something bad?" Jennifer gently stroked her son's hair and shook her head. "No, you spoke the truth with courage. That's never a bad thing." But complex emotions swirled in her heart. The shock of her ex-husband and sister-in-law's betrayal, and the fact that they had a child from their relationship. She now understood the reason for Michael's cold attitude after the divorce and his indifference toward Tyler, and above all the anxiety about how today's events would change their lives. Would Misha and his family seek revenge against them? How would Tyler continue his relationship with his father? But tonight she decided to put those worries aside. Now was the time to celebrate her son's courage and love. "Mom, I'm hungry," Tyler whispered. Jennifer laughed and kissed his cheek. "Yes, we didn't get dinner at that place, did we? Let's buy some hamburgers on the way home and eat them in peace at home." The taxi continued through the evening darkness, and mother and son leaned against each other quietly, heading toward an uncertain but new beginning. Tonight's events had changed their lives forever, but Jennifer believed it was a change for the better. "Tyler," she said quietly, "from now on, let's live strongly together. You really are a wonderful child." Tyler looked up at his mother and nodded slightly. His eyes held an adult-like determination. Today, he had become the protagonist of his own life. 3 months later, on an autumn afternoon, Jennifer straightened her new uniform at Maple Diner. Looking at herself in the mirror, a deputy manager badge gleamed on her chest. "Congratulations." Jenny, her colleague, surrounded her with bouquets. A well-deserved promotion. Since that day, her life had begun to move in unexpected directions. The restaurant owner, appreciating her years of loyalty and diligence, had offered her a promotion to deputy manager. "I was impressed by your strength and patience," the owner had said, restoring her confidence. Meanwhile, the events at Caroline's wedding had become the talk of the town, and people's reactions were surprising. Many supported Jennifer and Tyler, praising their courageous actions. Caroline had left town to escape the disgrace, starting a new life in a city hundreds of miles away. Ironically, she was now raising a child as a single mother herself. She who once looked down on Jennifer was now experiencing the same hardships. Michael had lost his position at the company, and his social reputation had plummeted. He had contacted Jennifer several times, saying he wanted to try again, but she firmly refused, saying, "We're over. I'm walking a new path in life." Beverly became isolated within the family and lost her standing in social circles. Her son and daughter's forbidden relationship had dealt a fatal blow to her arrogance. One day, Jennifer received an apology letter from her. After much inner conflict, she sent a brief reply saying, "Can let the past go, but that's different from 4S, Mom." Look, Tyler returned from school showing her a test paper, a plus. Jennifer hugged her son Tyler, took pride in his mother's transformation, and had become respected by his friends at school as a champion of justice. His small action had not only changed his mother's life but also contributed to his own growth. In the evening, Jennifer was preparing to head to her night class at the local community college. A few weeks after that day, she had received a scholarship to pursue the nutrition degree she had given up on years ago. With Tyler staying at Aunt Sarah's next door, she absorbed new knowledge as a student, 3 days a week. "Mom, can you become a restaurant owner in the future?" Tyler asked. Jennifer smiled. "Yes, I can. I've just taken the first step now." She no longer felt ashamed of being a single mother, but took pride in it. The bond between her and her son had become even stronger. Since that day, sometimes she remembered the events at that wedding. If Tyler hadn't stood up that day, I might still have lost sight of my own value. She realized life sometimes unfolds in unexpected ways. The wedding that was meant to humiliate her had opened the door to a new life for her and her son. "Ready?" she asked Tyler. They had promised to watch his favorite movie after her class tonight. Tyler nodded brightly. "Yes, Mom, we're the strongest team." Jennifer gently stroked her son's hair. Their story was not an ending, but a beginning.